Located at 966 Lindley Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut, lies a small house at first glance is really nothing special. It's a small, modern-style home with a small yard. Nothing really creepy or off-putting about it. However, looks can be very deceiving, and it's not until you know of the history of 966 Lindley Street and you get a real good idea of just how haunted it was. These events took place in 1974 and still leave many people to this day confused and speechless as to what exactly happened that would later become dubbed the Bridgeport Poltergeist. Okay, real quick, I'd like to thank Dark Histories. I'll leave his channel down below. I got a lot of the information for this video from him, and he goes through his stuff very thoroughly. He goes in depth with his video of Lindley Street, so I'll leave a link to his video as well as his channel down below. If you guys do enjoy this video, however, be sure to leave a like, share with your friends, and please do subscribe. Also, feel free to comment down below. I've been seeing that a lot of people have been commenting, and we do respond to most, if not all, our comments. So feel free to comment down below. Also, too, while writing the script for this video, I noticed that there is a book that details all the interviews of everybody except the family. You'll see why. Except the family involved in the Bridgeport Poltergeist. So I'll leave a link to the Amazon page for the book down below in the description as well. Also, I'm going to be doing something new at the end of the video, so please stick around till the end of the video to catch what exactly I'm going to be doing. That being said, onto the video. The home was owned by Gerald and Laura Goodin. Many people who knew Gerald would say he was a very good person, being a devout Catholic, serving in the United States Air Force during World War II, as well as being an active supporter of the Boy Scouts of America. Laura, his wife, who he met and married in 1960, faced discrimination due to her Native American heritage. Not long after they were married, Gerald and Laura would begin to raise a family. On Halloween of 1961, Gerald Jr. Goodin was born, and Gerald and Laura both cherished and loved their son. But a dark cloud would soon loom over the Goodin family. 6 months after Gerald Jr. was born, he would later be diagnosed with cerebral palsy, a disorder that affects a person's ability to move and posture, with some severe cases leading to deaths in newborns. Gerald and Laura, however, were both dedicated to having their son pull through his condition and giving him the best life he could possibly have with this condition. Gerald would take him to many physical therapy appointments, and unfortunately, Gerald would soon feel the heavy cost of their son's medical needs. It wasn't until September of 1967 Gerald Jr. would contract a horrible cold and pass away. Not too long after their son passing, Laura was diagnosed with a tumor that required her to get a hysterectomy, which also removed any chance of her bearing a child in the future. For many months, the Goodins were grief-stricken and would visit their son's grave every single day for 6 months. Eventually, with time, they decided they did want to have another child again, but with Laura undergoing her surgery, that was impossible, so they looked into adoption. They contacted the church, and they were introduced to a little 4-year-old girl named Marcia. Marcia, much like Laura, had Native American heritage. Gerald and Laura adopted 4-year-old Marcia. From here, Gerald and Laura both agreed to give Marcia a wonderful life and to keep her safe no matter what. However, their safety would later turn out to become overbearing. Marcia soon attended school, however she could not have a normal childhood and make many friends due to Laura being very cautious of who her daughter associated with in fear of keeping her safe. This led to Marcia becoming very isolated and spending most of her time at home with her mother. And it was at this moment the weird occurrences started happening at 966 Lindley Street. Initially, it wasn't anything much at first. Unimportant items would go missing, and tapping could be heard at different parts of the house at very weird times of the day. At first, Gerald dismissed much of the occurrences and assumed that maybe there could be something wrong with the pipes, or chalking it up to something logical was wrong with the house. Even chalking it down to that local children could potentially be playing pranks on the family. He had technicians come to the house on Lindley Street, but surprisingly, everything checked out and there was nothing wrong internally with the house. Eventually, this would escalate to Gerald and Laura Goodin waking up one night and noticing a disembodied hand outside their bedroom window. Gerald got up out of bed, would run outside only to find that there was no one there. Then came the furniture. With no one home, furniture would be rearranged and moved around. They would come home to pictures crooked or on the floor, as well as looking at like the house was broken into. At this point, Gerald had a real tough time trying to logically explain everything that was going on within his home. He had a real tough time accepting that what could potentially be happening in his home was related to the paranormal, but what would soon come would change his opinion. It was at this point Marcia had fallen victim to intense bullying and racism due to her Native American heritage, with everything culminating when Marcia got into a fight in school, and the fight would leave her in a body brace. This event prompted Laura, which, in the whole agreement of keeping Marcia safe, Laura pulled Marcia from school and dedicated much of her time to homeschooling Marcia. It was almost as if when Marcia began homeschooling, this is when the occurrences would spike. The knocking that Gerald would hear at weird hours of the day would now continue all throughout the day, mostly while Gerald was at work. The knocking would soon turn into rumbling and rattling coming from within the walls, and objects, including furniture, would levitate, as well as doors opening and closing on their own. Windows would shatter, chairs and couches would slide across the room. In even one occurrence, Laura got her foot injured by furniture that was levitating and it falling on her foot. As well as the most disturbing part of the occurrences being disembodied voices can now be heard throughout the home. Marcia was allegedly attacked by an unseen force and was levitated in the air and thrown against a wall. Over time, the Goodins would accept that they had fallen victim to a haunting. Of what haunting exactly wasn't certain, but the one thing they were certain of, it was not there to make peace. The Goodin family at this point now began to reach out and seek help. It may seem insane initially, but at first they contacted the Bridgeport Police Department. Now, at this point, the story goes that when the two officers arrived to the house on Lindley Street, the two lion statues in front of the Goodin home, so they had one on the right side of the door, one on the left side of the door of the Goodin home. The officers walked by the lion statues and they reported that the lion statues would roar at them, as well as the lion's eyes following them up into the house. The officers also witnessed the levitation that the Goodins experienced, with the officers witnessing the Goodins' 400-pound fridge levitating on its own. The officers began to investigate just exactly how the fridge would levitate on its own, investigating everything and anything, and finding absolutely nothing that could have made the fridge levitate on its own. While all these events are most certainly enough to drive anyone out of their home, the Goodins continue to stick it out. And while all these events are still genuinely disturbing, it sadly would only get worse for the Goodins. Marcia's pet cat, whose name was Sam, was due for a vet appointment one day. Nothing big, it was a small surgery. Easy peasy for Sam the cat. Went in for the surgery, came back home. But it was when he got back home, he started acting very strange, the Goodins would say. It was almost as if Sam was trying to speak to the Goodins, with the Goodins eventually going on to say Sam would talk. It got to the point of it becoming so bad, Gerald would take Sam and put him in the basement, with Sam now yelling at Gerald,
"Let me out of the basement, you dirty Frenchman."
With that not being bad enough, firefighters also showed up to the Goodin household one day, with one firefighter facing the wrath of Sam the cat. The firefighter, upon entering the house, noticed Sam. Sam looked at the firefighter and asked him how his son was doing. The firefighter, both in shock and disturbed, responded to Sam saying, "My son is dead." Sam the cat would then retort,
"I know,"
and ran off, calling the firefighter an Italian slur. Fortunately, that is the last major incident of Sam the cat. So, yeah, it made the cat talk. At this point, the house on Lindley Street was starting to become a spectacle. It's reported that almost 2,000 onlookers flooded Lindley Street in the hopes to witness the haunting. Traffic would be backed up for miles, and eventually police had no choice but to block off Lindley Street with barricades. The crowds would become so desperate to see anything at all paranormal, that they would stay in the street late into the night just to witness anything at all supernatural within the Goodin household. Some onlookers would soon get their wish. The Goodins' lawn flamingos making ungodly noises late at night. Seeking additional help, the Goodins soon contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren. Lorraine would recall seeing police praying before entering the Goodin home, while also asking for a priest's blessing before they even entered the home, with Lorraine later stating they were at the mercy of God. Through many interviews with the family, Marcia, onlookers, police, and firefighters, Ed would theorize that whatever was happening within the house had some correlation with Marcia. More so, Marcia's unhappiness. Ed would say Marcia gave off a very negative aura, which meant one of two things. One, negative entities became attracted to Marcia's negative aura and have now infested the Goodin household and are now oppressing the Goodin family. Or two, Marcia's aura was so strong and so negative, she unknowingly manifested a poltergeist. A poltergeist is another classification of a haunting. Usually it's brought on by a negative environment, or in this case, a negative aura per se, but poltergeists usually all act the same. The word poltergeist is German, and simply it means noisy ghost. The poltergeist will torment its victims by banging things or on the walls, moving furniture, hiding important or valuable items, physically attacking its victims, and even in some cases of Sam the cat, even leading to possession. Whichever theory was correct, what Ed was 100% certain about, whatever was within 966 Lindley Street was inhuman. Once the Warrens got involved, this caused the crowds to spike dramatically, and they only grew more in number, more people flooding to Lindley Street. The whole event was becoming a serious nuisance for the town of Bridgeport and the police department, with it taking up most of their resources, and the Bridgeport Police Department having to dedicate most of their time just to managing the whole Lindley Street traffic situation, as well as many of the people occupying the Lindley Street area. The Goodin's reality of the haunting would soon be shattered, however, when Marcia would be caught by an investigator moving a TV with her foot. The investigator made eye contact with Marcia and pulled her off to the side and asked her why exactly she did that, which she responded with she wanted to see if the spirit would interact with her by doing that. At that point, she was confronted and she confessed to most of all the occurrences within the home, going as far as to explain how exactly she pulled off every single stunt, including the levitation, including Sam the cat talking. Word spread like wildfire, and many of the people within the crowd knew of the hoax and would soon disperse off of Lindley Street. Ed and Lorraine Warren would be turned away by the Goodin family, with them taking the police's word with it being a hoax and not needing the Warrens' involvement anymore in their home. Ed, however, had a feeling that Marcia was lying in order to clear the crowds off of Lindley Street. What was looking like the Bridgeport haunting was now looking like the Bridgeport hoax. The Goodins would retreat in shame back into their home as the case came to a close as a hoax. But the disturbing hauntings would soon continue to plague 966 Lindley Street. Police would continue to monitor the home, since 3 men were recently arrested trying to burn down the Goodins' home to rid the house of the evil inside of it. While most of the onlookers were gone, some onlookers did remain, but not to the caliber that the former crowd was at. Most of the onlookers now were just die-hard paranormal fans and wanted to see if anything weird would happen after the event being called a hoax. One night, an officer was called into the Goodin home by Gerald. He waved him down at the door. The officer would say that Gerald looked distressed and very disturbed before entering the home, and the officer witnessing as to just what made Gerald that frightened. He entered the home, and sure enough, everything was completely upside down. There was one thing that was different, however, though, this time. Marcia was in full view of all the officers, and the couch and recliner both moved across the room, with Marcia not even logically being able to pull off that stunt. Things kept escalating from there at this point. When the Goodins left to visit family out of state, they returned home to a home that was completely in disarray, almost as if the home was broken into once again. The house would be in shambles, couches would be moved across the room, furniture would be upside down, pictures would be on the floor either shattered or crooked on the walls. It was just a complete mess. The Goodins, eventually they would adopt a German Shepherd, only to have the German Shepherd cower under a bed in fear of whatever was in the home and refuse to leave underneath the bed. Gerald at this point would soon be contacted by the American Society for Psychical Research to offer help as well as to investigate the hauntings that were going on within his home. Gerald agreed, however, not to publicize or to make it public what exactly was going on in his home, probably to deter any future crowds gathering on Lindley Street again. All of the family members were yet again interviewed, and out of all of them, the investigators came to the conclusion that Marcia suffered the most of all of the Goodin family. The investigators would even access police records. It was at this point that the Bridgeport haunting was unsolved and back open for an investigation. Gerald allowed the investigators to work and find whatever they could. Eventually, things kept happening. It would come, it would go. After some time, Gerald and his family decided to pack things up and decided for a new start for him and his family, with them moving out of the house in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and finding peace somewhere else, and would depart Bridgeport, Connecticut. Many years later, Laura Goodin would die in a car accident with Gerald Goodin following her death 4 years later. As for Marcia, not much is known about what exactly happened with Marcia. She left the Goodin household where they eventually moved to at the age of 18 to find her birth parents, and is presumed Marcia died in 2015. Not much is known of what goes on at 966 Lindley Street today, if the occurrences still take place or if they have ceased altogether. The house sits quiet and a cold reminder to the residents of Bridgeport, Connecticut, that there are things out there beyond the grasp the human mind can ever comprehend. The case has been closed, victims took their experiences to the grave, and many are left confused and torn in two if what happened was the Bridgeport hoax, or if it was all true. The Goodins were genuine of their accounts of the Bridgeport poltergeist. Okay, so yet again, I'd like to thank you guys for viewing the video. Also staying all the way to the end. That's awesome. I'll get to what we're about to do for the end. It's to make it a little bit more engaging. Hopefully, get more comments down below. I like when you guys comment. It feels like we're building a community, which is pretty awesome. Not gonna lie, it's pretty awesome. But I'll get to that in a moment. But I'd also like you guys, if you guys have any knowledge on this, if you guys have your own personal opinions about the Bridgeport poltergeist, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below. I heard the story online, and I felt like, it was important for me to share this with you guys. This amazed me. I had no clue that this happened in Connecticut. I had no knowledge of it, and it's amazing the accounts that some of these people have come out and said it, with police officers coming out and saying it, firefighters coming out and saying it. Just for the whole fact a cat talked still blows my mind. Like, for a firefighter to come out and say a cat talked, that's nutty. But he saw what he saw, and he's dedicated to saying a cat talked, so I don't know. Anyway, what I'd like to start doing on True Fear After Hours is giving you guys a sneak peek into the next episode. This is what I'm going to refer to as the sneak peek. It'll be called a premonition of the next episode. So, first one to guess the premonition correctly will get their comment pinned up at the top in the comment section. So, good luck, you guys. Here's a premonition of the next episode. Good luck, and good night.